Yeah, a pro-Hamas demonstration happening out across the street from the Holocaust Museum in downtown Dallas. And they had printed flyers, they had professional printed flyers, which now I look back, I'm like, "That's suspicious, it's been less than
Ye
24 hours, how did you get those mass produced?"
right. So, I wanna introduce you guys to a special guest, goes by the name of Liv. You guys can call her Liv now, just like I can call her Liv. We're on a nickname basis now. Now, I came across your channel maybe a week and a half ago, and probably in the first 20 minutes, I was like, "Okay, we got to sit down and have a conversation," right?
Love it. Yeah,
There were
yeah.
a few things that popped out to me before I even watched any content. I'm one of those people who will read your bio, and I saw 2 words. I saw Christian and I saw Zionist,
Mhm.
and I was like, "Okay." And then I saw, "Oh, wait, Gen Z. Okay,
She's okay,
I
authority.
it's one thing if, you were 50, 60, 70-year-old and you understood all this context, but being a Gen Z Christian Zionist who is outspoken about it is one of the rarest things that I come across at this point,
Yeah, isn't that a
right?
depressing thing to have to say?
It's actually wild. And so I want to start off with asking you, a question that's oftentimes been coming up is like, why are you speaking out? Why are you bothering yourself instead of,
Yeah.
enjoying a avocado toast and a latte or something like that?
Yeah, so, I mean, I've been traveling to Israel since I was 15, so I'm,
Mm,
not this is not a new realm to me. I've been doing pro-Israel advocacy work since before October 7th,
wow.
and so for me, a huge part of the reason why I got involved, aside from just feeling spiritually convicted to be
Mm,
involved, was because I've been doing this for such a long time. I have friends here who are serving in the IDF. I have people that I
mhm,
care about who live in this country, and I know their hearts. I've heard them talk about what it's like to live in Israel, to live under the threat of constant people of all of their neighbors wanting them dead,
yeah.
and, so I was like, after October 7th, I'd been working in the pro-Israel space for a long time, and I had all of a sudden friends who I knew personally who knew that I'd been working in the pro-Israel space start posting a bunch of pro-Hamas propaganda, and,
Hmm,
I'd reach out and be like, "Hey, do you wanna have a conversation?" "No, I don't wanna
yeah.
have a conversation. You're a Zionist. I'm not gonna talk to you anymore." Like, friends that I'd known since I was a kid. And so at that point, I was like, "Okay, well, I know you're not gonna have a private conversation with me, but I mean, we're all human beings. I
Yeah.
you check people's social media when you know they're posting controversial things just to, like, see what everybody else is saying." So I was like, "Okay, if you're not gonna listen to me, I'm just gonna start posting on social media." So that's kind
It's almost like I'm gonna have the conversation at some point, even if it's me having it by myself.
right, exactly. You don't have to be a part of it, but I'm still gonna talk about it.
So I want to get a little deeper into this thing of this rift that was created. Now, how old are you?
I'm 26.
Okay, 26. So perfect. 29. So I remember when the whole Summer of Love, George Floyd, BLM thing was
Yes.
happening, right? And it was a strange thing because in the church, I was seeing the same division that was happening in the world, and I was kind of confused about it.
Mhm.
I wasn't as outspoken about conservatism or any of these things. I didn't even have the sort of grounding I have now, but I do remember getting phone calls from, you know, white friends, and they're like, "What do I do?
Yeah,
What did I do? Why won't this and this person talk to me anymore?"
yeah.
It was the craziest thing, Liv. And so I kind of want to, bounce off of that to say, okay, so you're saying you had like high school friends? Is it lifelong friends? And
Yeah.
what are those conversations actually like with these people?
It's interesting because I think some of them started out
Hmm.
genuine and kind, like friends that I'd known for a very long time,
Yeah.
since middle school, high school, had, started out polite, reached out to me on October 7th and were like, "Hey, I know that this is something you've been doing for a long time. I know you have a lot of close friends there. How are
Hmm.
you doing?" And then that very quickly, like, it was radio silent for a weird amount of time, and then it turned into I saw what they were posting on the internet. It was like
Okay.
and I'm like, "Okay, so clearly something happened between," and a lot of it is because The propaganda is so good. It's
Yeah,
like, I get it. If I honestly, if I hadn't have been in this space for as long as I had been, I would be susceptible to it too because it is
I
so
get that.
effective. So that's really how a lot of it started.
And what was some of this propaganda? Is it full Gaza Wood style videos or?
Yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of misinformation, first of all, just straight up lies about the
Mhm,
IDF, about Israel, about, Hamas only attacked soldiers on October 7th, which we obviously know isn't true, things like
mhm,
that. But a lot of it, and I think the reason why it's so effective is so much of it is based purely on emotion and tapping
mhm.
into the part of your brain that is sympathetic. Obviously,
Yeah,
there's nothing wrong, and it is a moral good to feel sympathetic
of
for
course.
Palestinians in Gaza who are being mistreated by Hamas, who has consistently used them as a pawn in a political
Yeah.
game to kill Jews. It's
Mhm.
right to feel empathetic and to mourn the loss of human life. Where it
Absolutely.
becomes twisted is when you confuse your sympathy for Palestinians with hatred to Jews. That's where it becomes a
Oh.
manipulation tactic, and that's a lot of what I
Mm.
saw people posting right after October 7th.
And how quickly did this happen? I'm curious.
Honestly,
Yeah.
I saw it happen within 24 hours of October 7th. Actually, on October 8th, the day after, I heard about a pro-Hamas rally happening in downtown Dallas across
Mm.
the street from the Holocaust Museum, and I thought to
Wait, wait,
myself,
wait, wait. I'm sorry. Can you run that back one more time?
"Yeah,
You said
uh-huh.
what?
Yeah, a pro-Hamas demonstration happening out across the street from the Holocaust Museum in downtown Dallas." And they had printed flyers, they had professional printed flyers, which now I look back, I'm like, "That's suspicious, it's been less than
Ye
24 hours, how did you get those mass produced?"
right.
Regardless, I thought I saw, like, a promotional picture for this event, and I was like, "Surely that's a sick joke." So I decided to go, so after
Mhm.
church, I went, and I was like, this is crazy. People out there cheering. And at that point, Israel hadn't retaliated at all. Israel hadn't even really defended itself the way it needed to at that point. So, really, all you're out there doing on October 8th is celebrating the death of Jews. That's exactly what.
Yeah.
Um, Crazy stuff.
And, are some of these people the ones around you? And I guess let me backtrack a little bit. So,
Mhm.
did you go the traditional route? You went to college, right out of high school, etcetera?
Yeah, so
Where'd you go?
I was homeschooled.
Okay.
So
Oh, thank God.
yeah, right?
That makes
God, and
sense.
I fully intend on homeschooling my children. So I
That
was
makes sense.
homeschooled. I was pulled out of a private school in 3rd grade and homeschooled, and I did
Mm.
a program called Classical Conversations, which is a pretty
Oh,
popular homeschool curriculum, and I did that all the way through high school and then graduated high school, and I went to a small Baptist college in downtown Dallas called Criswell College, and
okay.
then now I got my, um like, my BA in psychology, and now I'm getting my master's in
Mm.
Holocaust and Genocide Studies from Gratz College, which is, in Pittsburgh.
So you never had this experience of indoctrination in school necessarily?
And I grew up in a household that was very, I did competitive speech and debate all 4 years of high school. So for me, it
Mm.
was natural to, I took a college level logic course in high school to
Wow.
learn about logical fallacies and how to evaluate credible evidence and credible sources and all of that stuff. And so for me, all of the misinformation and all of these things that, we're seeing plaguing our generations right now,
Mm.
I grew up in an environment where I was just taught naturally as a reflex to think critically about those kinds of things. And I really think that, and I'm sure you'd agree, that that's something that's incredibly lacking in our generation is that sort of critical thinking muscle.
I mean, truth be told, I think it might be the core issue. It's just people don't know how to think.
Yeah.
As crazy as that sound, and of course we have spiritual is always going to be the foundation, it is the tactics of the enemy, but
Mhm.
on a physical representation, as I think to myself, okay, what are the problems with this generation? It's not that we don't have enough information. We have all the information in the world literally at our fingertips. Okay, is it that, the moral, well, technically, after the quote unquote true summer of love,
Mhm.
and that entire 1960s, 1970s pushing. I mean, God has been out of the conversation for a while. What is it? And you just hit the nail on the head. Can you think for yourself? Do you
Yeah.
have the ability to think outside of a 30-second TikTok?
Mhm.
So, okay, you're this kid who's growing up in the world of using your brain. And so who are these friends that you're making that are like, you know what I mean? Where did you get these people that are now falling for the propaganda?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, obviously I can't speak for each individual person, but I do think that there's such a desire amongst, I mean, both your generation and mine and the one after ours for community. And
Mhm.
I think we have an innate desire to seek something bigger than ourselves. And the correct response, the Christian response, is to seek God, to
Yeah.
seek church, to find community in that way. And I think when you don't have that, there's a vacuum. And obviously, that
Absolutely.
vacuum is going to be replaced by seeking something bigger than yourself in whatever way that looks like.
Mm.
And for a lot of people that I know, I think that the way that that translated was pro-Palestinian movement. Seeking
Hmm.
something bigger than yourself, seeking a cause where you feel like you can be a martyr. And let's be honest, like, our problems in the West are so minuscule in comparison to what other countries have to face just in their regular day-to-day lives.
Yeah.
And so I think we're living in a generation where we want to suffer for something bigger than ourselves. And I don't
Mm.
think that's necessarily a bad feeling per se.
Yeah.
I think it's good to be willing to suffer and sacrifice for something greater than yourselves. That's what a lot of scripture calls us to do. But
Absolutely. Bear
we
your cross
exactly, carry a
daily.
cross. I
Yeah.
mean, the whole, like, the institution of marriage, like, everything about
Mm.
that is involving sacrificing something for something bigger than yourself. But when
Yeah.
that gets translated over to hating other people is when it obviously becomes a
Mm.
problem. So I think a lot of the people that I grew up with, unfortunately for them, I think that that was part of part of where they leaned. And, for me, it's one of those things where I don't, as much as it does frustrate me
Mm.
because I have a personal stake in all of this, it it doesn't bother me in the sense that I know 5 years from now when they've moved on to, like, another conflict that also has nothing to do with them,
Yeah.
I'll still be here, you know? So
Mm.
and hopefully at that point, they'll be willing to have a conversation. Will they be able to undo the harm their rhetoric has caused? No, but
Mm.
this will not be the last time Israel will be in a war.
Of
I
course,
mean,
yeah. I
hopefully it
mean,
would be
well,
nice
I
to say,
mean, according
but
to prophecy, this is essentially the beginning, right?
yeah, right,
And
right.
for the greater glory of God, that Israel, no matter what. Look, I'm reading through Isaiah this morning. I finished off the book
Wow.
of Isaiah for the first time officially, and I realize now why you have a generation who even considers themselves as Christian, right? Christ is king posted,
Yeah.
but are afraid to actually go through the word. Because
Mhm.
once you go through this, your
Yep.
your Judar is
Uh-huh.
about to be broken. There is a nonstop Jewery taking place in the Bible from beginning to end.
Which I don't, and I posted about this on my story yesterday. Somebody was like, "How do you feel about Christians who hate Jews but use Jesus' name?" I was like, "The idea of a Christian anti-Semite is an oxymoron. Like, you cannot claim to love Jesus and then turn around and hate his people." It
Thank you.
it just it bothers me.
You're
It
gonna
really
live in New
does.
Jerusalem with
Yeah.
a Jewish Messiah
Yes.
and
Like,
simultaneously
you're gonna have a
beefing.
problem with that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. It's just, and I think that's actually, people ask me, like, "What bothers you the most?"
Mm,
I can get comments from atheists,
yeah.
Muslims, anything. I get one anti-Semitic comment from a Christian, I'm like, "Oh,
Mm,
that really bothers me," because
yeah.
it's just it's so hard to reconcile how you could claim to love Jesus and also hate his people.
So that being said, I want to get into the groyperification of your generation, okay? Because
Fun.
this is happening smack dab, right? So,
Yeah.
okay, where is your thought process about the individual that is Nick Fuentes, as well as what you see as far as this movement that's unfortunately planted itself in the conservative space?
Yeah. I think what's really hard for me and what I think I struggle with the most about not just Nick, but also people like Tucker and Candace
Mhm.
is and this is just, like, what I think about, is do they actually believe what they're saying?
Hmm.
Because these people were at one point very critical thinkers, very good at their jobs, like, reputable journalists who cited credible sources,
Yeah.
who were looked up to for that kind of thing, and then for them to turn around and pivot, the
Yeah.
only real, explanation I have for that is 2 things. It could be either or it could be both. You are either being paid
Mhm.
to say some type of talking point, or you're spiritually blind.
That's good.
I don't know which is true. For
Yeah.
Nick, it's frustrating because for Nick and for Candace and for Tucker, but Nick especially because I think Tucker and Candace have a way of softening their ideas in a sense
Mm.
to where it's, like, easier to digest, whereas Nick just straight up says the thing. Like, he will
Yeah.
straight up tell you that women wanna be raped and that Jews deserve the death penalty and all of these things, right? He's not attempting to soften his ideas at all. All
Yeah.
he'll do is sprinkle in a couple Bible verses to make you think that he's coming from a gospel-oriented position. But when
Mhm.
you look at anything he says, and then you actually read your Bible, you
Yeah.
know all of those arguments immediately fall apart. And
Absolutely.
so I think it's really dangerous and something that the church as a whole should be paying a lot more attention to. And I've actually thankfully been
Mm.
seeing a few pastors
Yeah.
begin to start talking about this on social media because I think it is becoming an increasingly large issue, is because the men who are in church right now who feel as though they aren't part of that community, because you can be going to a church and feel like you're not part of a community,
Of course.
are obviously going to be Nick's first victims, and once that kind of stuff gets into the congregation, it's really, really difficult to get out.
Mm. And so are you seeing, in the same way you have this I guess simping for Hamas taking place, are you seeing this in your more internal locus or are you seeing this just as external? Is it real in your world?
That's a good question. I think, in my congregation and my church,
Mhm.
I think that obviously all the people that I know are pro-Israel, but I will say
Uh,
that I think that there is a delineation to be made about like, when people ask, like, "Why are you Zionist?" I say, "Well,
yeah.
there's really 2 reasons. One is from, like, a non-Christian standpoint that can apply to anybody. I can make an
Mhm.
argument as to why anybody should be a Zionist. But
Yeah.
there's also the biblical side of things as well, believing
Mhm.
that the Jewish people are God's chosen people. They're the apple of his eye. God has not
Mm.
broken his covenant. The only reason I
Yeah.
know that my God is a faithful God to me as an individual, as a Gentile, is because he is also faithful to the Jewish people. If he's
Absolutely.
not faithful to the Jewish people, then there's no reason he should be faithful to me because that is a God who can break covenants and break his promises.
Yeah.
So it's
Do
as
we
simple
call
as
him a
that.
liar?
Right,
Mm.
absolutely, you're calling God a liar. So, I think even though there's a lot of people who go to church, I think especially in the older generation who would call themselves pro-Israel, they are, I would say, not as educated on the
Yeah.
reasons why they should be pro-Israel from a non-Christian, from just a factual standpoint. Israel being a buffer towards Middle Eastern countries, fighting a lot of the Islamic extremists that want us dead as Americans, those kinds of things, and knowing more about the war in Gaza. And so my wish would be that Christians would understand why they're Zionist or pro-Israel from a spiritual perspective, but also
Hmm.
from a just factual perspective as well.
And I want to bring a little clarity. The factual, obviously, meaning tactile,
Right.
political, social, economic, right? Because truth
Absolutely.
be told, there is really one foundational reality, and that is God's reality, and what He says is final, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because
Amen. Yeah.
we
Thanks for
put that
clarifying.
out there, folks like to get in the comments and, well, actually
Really, yeah,
speaking,
parse it
okay,
out,
hi,
yeah,
trust
for
me,
sure.
that is what we're alluded to. So, okay. This is interesting because I've been in this place where I've been, I guess this might be the first time I'm actually saying this out loud to anybody but myself, or me and my wife. I've been putting together a paper, and in this paper, I'm essentially it's a thesis of Christian Zionism from the standpoint of both, right? The Christian aspect and the Zionist aspect.
Mhm.
And in it, it's led by basically, at the surface level, the Groyper sort of questioning,
Mhm.
which still hasn't been challenged in the necessary way. It's like, just something as simple as, well, Jews were kicked out of 110 countries, right? What about the
Right.
USS Liberty? Like things that are so simple, you could just Google search and
Mhm.
you'll find out that this is contradicted 100 times over. But they can say this because, like you said, most people are not doing the due diligence to actually understand the fullness of this. And so I want to lead into that conversation because you're now somebody who is in school educating yourself on the Holocaust.
Mhm.
And we are in an age of unprecedented Holocaust denial. I didn't know how deep it was until I started speaking on these things, right? And so I think I came across a video of yours on LinkedIn, and you're kind of explaining a story of, here you are in school studying the thing, and then you're going out and seeing the thing, et cetera. And so,
Yeah.
what led you into this place of these studies to begin with? And then, we can, I guess, unpack the entire Holocaust narrative of it and, the importance of understanding facts as opposed to feelings.
Yeah. So I have been getting my master's since I wanna say 2022, like, early 2022, so before October 7th,
Mm-hmm.
and, the reason why it started was actually because my undergrad degree is in psychology,
Okay.
and I was going to go into, like, church counseling. That was kind of the direction I thought I might be headed in,
Mm-hmm.
and then by the end of my degree, I was like, "I don't know if that's actually really what I wanna do." I went on a trip to Israel. It really moved me and impacted me in such a life-changing way that I was like, "I really wanna do something Israel related."
Hmm.
And then, in I wanna say it was also, like, around early 2022, I went on a trip to Ukraine to do volunteer work, to do humanitarian aid on the Polish side of the Ukrainian border.
Mm-hmm.
And, every day, like, watching hundreds and hundreds of refugees flee their homes, and a lot of them Jewish. There were a lot of Israeli agencies there helping the Jewish people return to flee Ukraine and go to Israel, and
Wow.
I was like, "Wow, this is so," like, I didn't know that this was here, and,
Hmm.
I really felt like God just put it on my heart, like, I wanted to study psychology, but I think more than that, the thing that God had put on my heart was not necessarily individual psychology, but group psychology. What causes one group
Hmm.
of people to enact physical violence against another group of people?
Yeah.
And so then I was like, well, I don't know how I would study that for a degree program. And right after that, I met a friend of mine. Her name's Brittany. She's getting her master's in Holocaust studies from Haifa University here in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, Holocaust studies, I've never heard of that before. So I looked it up, and there were a couple universities offering it, and one is Gratz College, and it's an online program based in the United States. And so I was like, I think the degree program description said something along the lines of this program is made for people who want to understand why one group of people is willing to commit violence against another. And I was like, "Okay, God, like,
Wow.
that feels pretty obvious to me." And so I started getting my master's, and then October 7th happened, and it was just the most I mean, for me, I'd spent, at that point, over a year reading about, watching videos of the Holocaust, watching, these black and white footage
Mm-hmm.
of concentration camps, often with, like, no sound, and then Hamas comes in on October 7th, and they're broadcasting themselves butchering Jews with audio, video, color, all the things, and people are denying that it even happened. Like, as Hamas is filming themselves, like, they are proud of this, and people are
Yeah.
denying that it's happening, and so, it was very it was a spiritually very dark time for me. I was still studying and still learning and all of that, and so having to do that while also being on the internet was a wild thing,
Mm.
but it was odd. I think especially there was one week where I was studying something, and I opened my textbook and there was a picture of a store in Europe that said, "No Jews allowed" in German. And then I got on my phone and I saw at the student union at Columbia University, they'd put "No Zionists allowed" on the door. And I thought to myself, like, what a crazy parallel that these things, these people my age think that they're doing something new and edgy, and
Yeah.
really they're just recycling the same exact type of hatred, the same exact stereotypes, and just maybe changing a few words here and there so it's more digestible for them.
Hmm. Wow. Okay. So again, God drawing you into your calling, even knowing all the tools that, he had essentially instilled in you earlier in your life, the ability to reason, to debate a point, to get to the facts as opposed to. So, I guess it almost would be fair for me to kind of play this sort of quote unquote, well, it actually is the devil's literal advocate if you have to advocate for any of this, right?
Mm.
But to start off and say, okay, so how can we trust anything that we're told about the Holocaust?
So I think the same argument that I would use for Hamas is the same argument that I would use for the Nazis, which is that these were people who were proud of what they did. And this is
Mm,
verifiable by multiple countries, documents that were clearly tried to be destroyed by the Nazis. Um, and it's one of those things where I think our generation has become so like, I need to see it to believe it, and we do this
yeah.
spiritually too. We're like, "Well, if God's really real, then, like, I need to see it in order to believe it." And now when that's translating into everything else as well, and
Mm,
the thing is, like, you can go to these concentration camps and look at the records and look at the documents, and these are verifiable by multiple countries, not just, like,
yeah.
Israel, not just, Germany, whatever you wanna say. Um, and so I think people who are saying it because they don't fully understand. And maybe I'm naive here, and maybe there's just other reasons why people would say this as well, there probably is. You're saying it because you don't understand the depths of human depravity. The lengths that people will go to murder other
Hmm.
people. Maybe it's coming from a place of, like, I truly cannot reconcile it. Some of it's also coming from a place of hatred
Yeah,
because
of
you wanna
course.
say you wanna justify your hatred towards the Jewish people, but I think
Yeah.
also some of it comes from the fact that, like, we especially in the West where you live in such a bubble where you think that everybody wants the same exact things that you do, everybody
Yeah.
wants, peace and religious freedom and all these other values that we claim to hold, it makes it a whole lot easier to look at something and say, "That didn't ever happen," than coming to
Yeah.
terms with the fact that sometimes people are just that evil.
Yeah. And so, here you are. I want to bring a little more personal because you tapped into something. My coming back to faith and establishing myself in Christ and really knowing what that actually means for the first time in my life came as an almost direct result of me witnessing evil and allowing myself, right? I had gone into this new age bubble and, there is no real evil. Everything is everything, right? It's just two expressions of the same thing. And it's like the more I was getting into the space of information and it was, politics, but mostly social politics and things of that nature, mostly around black culture and, the cultural dynamics that have led to the depravity we see now. And the deeper I got, further I got down this proverbial rabbit hole, like you said, I could not reconcile with this thing of evil. And, again, that was my greatest avoidance is no, but how can you call, this innocent child evil? It's almost a cop out. Right? When it's, well, no, we're talking about a nature here, a sin nature. And I've heard this as a child, but it's like, this is the full expression of that sin nature. That's what you're seeing. This
Yeah.
isn't somebody woke up on a random Tuesday and something just clicked or, oh,
Yeah.
well, it's just mental illness. Like you said, it's groups being mobilized into something, which means we all have the capacity to do it.
Correct, correct, and I think that's exactly where our generation, like, robs themselves
Hmm.
is, you know, a very small percentage of the German population were actually Nazis, like,
Mhm.
actually part of the Nazi regime. There were times where there was a paper that I had to write one time about, a small Polish village. I forget, the name escapes me because it's a very long name. But the death squads would come in and to the town hall of, by the way, like, a self-proclaimed Christian town,
Mhm.
and they said all the Nazis had to do was give the permission for violence. Just say, "Turn over your Jews to us, and we'll deal with them." And the Christians in that town, the neighbors of these
Mhm.
Jewish people, turned the Jews in. They rounded them all up into a barn and lit the barn on fire, and there are now no Jews in that town to this day. And so you think about it, and when you say to yourself, and this is the part that actually, like, really gets me, like, fired up, is
Yeah.
so many Christians love to say, "If I was in Europe during the war, I would have hit a Jew in my house."
Yeah.
You won't even stand up for Jews on the internet.
Oh.
You won't, you know what I'm saying? Like, the whole point is standing up for people in the public square. "Oh, I'm afraid of losing friends." Okay, well, people who risked their lives to save Jews during the Holocaust were afraid of losing their life. So I think you can afford these
Correct.
couple friends to stand up for moral truth, you know? And so
Mm.
it's like you don't even, and the thing is you don't even have to agree with Israel or agree with the war in Gaza. But when you look and you see Jewish people being beaten and harassed in the streets, and as a Christian, you can't call that out for exactly what it is, there's a deeper problem going on there, in my opinion.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You have to hold the same level of disdain to see it and to just let it.
Mhm. Mhm.
Because there was this question also of like, why is there this favoritism? Well, Jews aren't the only victims. And it's like, well, my buddy Jules, who I had on not too long ago, he brought up this point and it just solidified it. It's that nobody else is denying the other
Yeah.
Holocaust. Nobody else is denying the other actual genocides. Nobody
Mhm.
says, oh, yeah, the Armenian genocide never happened. Prove it to
Right.
me. It's
Right.
only the
Only.
Jewish Holocaust
Yep. Yep. It's
where
so true.
anybody there's Rwanda. I've not met one person, not come across one person who, as a matter of fact, most people will look to even push the extent. Whereas with this one, well, the numbers couldn't have been that many. There's no way it
Yep.
was 6 million.
Yep.
It's the only
Yeah.
one. So I want to lead into then this next question because as sick as it is, like I believe if it was just if it was one person, 5 people, 10 people targeted for that specific reason and massacred, right? That's one too many. But 6 million. Now, how do you substantiate that from the studies of, you know, what you're in right now with the information that you have? How did they come to this number?
So a lot of it is documentation, and actually there's been over the years the number has, like, is it this million? Is it that million? Is it 6 million? Is
Mhm.
it 8 million? Obviously, the number hovers in between one of those 2, but the a lot of the problem was, like, for example, this town that I mentioned earlier where all of the Jews in this village were killed, they had the records for those people, but, like,
Mhm.
so many people didn't, there were no family records. There are family members who were like, "Yeah, I know my ancestors died, but I don't know anything about them because there were no records to
Mhm.
prove where they were." And so, and that's a lot of it due to the fact that the Nazis tried to cover up what they were doing when they realized that
Yeah.
they were losing the war. And so
Mhm.
when you go to these records and you see, I mean, you can go to Yad Vashem, you can go to, there's a couple other Holocaust museums that have it, where it's just a huge, like, rows and rows of papers of the
Mhm.
names of people that they were putting into these concentration camps and murdering. And then
Yeah.
you have the actual Holocaust victims themselves, the survivors who share their stories themselves. And I
Mhm.
think when I think about this, the scary thing from just an educational standpoint is, unfortunately, there's going to be a day not too long from now when there will be no Holocaust
Yeah.
survivors left to physically be around and tell their story. Obviously, a lot of them have documented their stories and have published books and all of those types of things. But to physically tell their story, like, that's up to our generation to memorize these
Yeah.
stories, to carry them with ourselves, to act as a witness, um,
Mm.
and to stand trial when they're being persecuted and stand up for them. And it's just a scary thing to think about that soon that will not be available to the next generation.
Yeah. That is something I was actually thinking about the other day as well. They're not even looking to listen to these stories. And truth be told, like you said, there is a massive part that has our responsibility, which is if it's like, their propaganda machine is working overtime, whether it is
Mhm.
the Fuenteses of the world, or it is the far leftist, they're continuously pumping out. Yes, it's lies, but the lie is going to catch. And so, if we're not doing the things like you're doing right now, which is, you know what, I'm going to put it out there, I'm going to talk about it and do it incessantly. And frankly, it's like you have to act as the anti propagandist. That's what I'm
Yeah,
realizing,
yeah.
where it's like, okay, you go ahead, please.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think too, it's interesting that a lot of times when you ask these people to explain where they got the conspiracy theory from, you'll find out very quickly that they just are parroting a talking point that they heard
Yeah.
from either Nick or somebody else or like a 30-second long TikTok video. And that's again where the can you think for yourself thing comes in, where like
Mm,
how much time did you actually dedicate to researching this conspiracy theory that you heard on the internet?
yeah,
Versus just listening to this 30-second clip. If you listen to the 30-second clip, that's fine. You should be able to listen to the people who disagree with you and are saying
sure.
outrageous things. But how much time are you dedicating to then proving whether or not they're correct? And that,
Mm,
I think, is where the problem is because our generation is so quick to just digest that information and not even think twice about it.
that is so ironic because we're also the generation of you have to show me,
Right.
you basically have to bring me to the crime
Right.
scene,
Right.
and expose me, and I'm still probably not going to believe you.
Right. Well,
And
and
they're
I
this.
mean, yeah, and Candace Owens, with this whole the
Hmm.
French trying to assassinate her or whatever, she finally came out and was like, I'm gonna prove all of this on my next show." So I was like, "Okay, if she's gonna prove it, then I'm gonna watch it." So I went to her podcast and I watched it,
Yeah.
and it says basically her reasoning was, "I submitted this to the White House and told them that
Okay.
this was going on, so now it's their job to prove it to you." And you can't tell me that someone like Candace Owens doesn't know what the burden of proof is. You are
Yeah.
the affirmative. You are the one who made a claim. It's your responsibility to bring credible evidence to back up that claim, not the negative. So
Mm,
we've like become this generation that we want the evidence, but then when we're presented with the evidence, we can just say, "Oh, well, 7K. You're paid 7K. Nothing
yep.
of nothing you for anymore." Like it's a wild dichotomy that we're living in right now.
Hmm. My goodness, that is such an incredible observation because yet again, it's like that's why I'm oftentimes caught between these two things of playing their game, which
Yeah.
is you just make the claim and just leave it there, or actually sandwiching in an entire, well, here's the factual basis of this thing. And ironically enough, as far as the world of content, the best performing as far as the far reaching has just been here's a story about this person and this happened to him and this happened to
Yep.
him. And those stories gravitate,
Yep.
as opposed to, well, here are the facts and here's the information and it's crickets.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so
Absolutely.
there's something to be said about the effectiveness because I say this without the demeaning spirit because I am in the cusp of millennial and zennial. So
Mhm.
I'm literally the last year 96 baby. So I
Mhm.
can say this without coming from some sort of boomer mentality or whatever they want to hand it to. We are
Mhm.
not an intelligent generation. We are not illiterate in the sense of we can't read. We're illiterate in the sense that we don't.
Yep. Amen. Yep.
And so again, and you could say, well, some of it's to blame on generations before and even creating these devices, and we are addicted to them. And so it catches me in this place where it's like, okay, well, we are where we are. So we
Mhm.
have to work with
Mhm.
whatever is around us, right?
Yeah.
use the digital medium. And so I want to segue that into a place of when you started making content, what was your thought process of like, okay, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z? Was it the same sort of thing with your studies where just God pulls you in and
I mean, yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I think for me, I felt such a I guess I expected after October 7th that there would be more Christians speaking out.
mm-hmm,
Um, and that wasn't the case, and that really upset me,
mm,
and people that I know who are Christian, who have been called every other name in the book suddenly, like, don't wanna say something because they're afraid of losing friends. My perspective has always been, if I lose you as a friend for standing up for my other friends, then you were never my friend to begin with. And
uh,
it just became I when I started, I think it was more, talking about there were just these egregious lies that I kept seeing about the war in Gaza and, like,
mm-hmm,
oh my gosh, Israel's committing a genocide against, the Palestinian people in Gaza. As somebody who's getting my master's in Holocaust and genocide studies, the average
mm,
civilian, so, like, the videos would start off being basically like, the average civilian to combatant ratio in warfare is 1 to 8 globally. That's like
mm,
a low bar estimate, which means you have 1 civilian killed for every 8 combatants.
mm-hmm.
Or no, sorry, 8 civilians killed for every 1
For
active
one
combatant,
combat, yeah, I was about to say that's a
right? Yeah,
master, yeah,
inverted,
master
sorry.
class.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, exactly. In Israel, due to the way that the IDF conducts war, which is essentially broadcasting your punches before you actually execute them, which puts them at an insane strategic disadvantage, but they do that because they value life. For example,
Mm,
dropping leaflets, knock on the roof bombs, calling Palestinians, texting Palestinians, broadcasting from loudspeakers, these kinds of things. The
yeah.
average civilian to combatant ratio in Gaza stands at 1 to 1, maybe 1 to 2, possibly 1 to 3, which is essentially unheard of, not just in modern
Yeah.
conflict globally, but especially in urban warfare. And so when you're
Hmm.
dealing with a terrorist group that is completely comfortable not wearing like uniforms, they're wearing civilian clothing, that are hiding in a tunnel system larger than the London Underground, that are booby trapping
Mm,
buildings to lure in IDF soldiers to kill them, all of these other things. So the video started out from just I knew all of this information and it was just
yeah.
killing me to watch people. Like, I couldn't get on social media and not be angry anymore. Like, it just
Yeah.
really was so frustrating to see so many people saying this. So I just started posting a few videos just sort of like debunking and talking about these errors that people were making, and it very quickly made its way onto the Jewish side of TikTok, which is where I started posting videos, and I got so many comments of people being like, "Thank you so much. I haven't seen a non-Jewish
Mm,
person talk about this." And then I was like, "Oh my gosh, all I'm saying is that the Jewish people have a right to live in their ancestral homeland, and
yeah.
that the Jewish people have a right to exist in the world without threat of death." The fact that I'm being thanked for that, I try not to even think about it for too long because it's
Yeah.
so, like, it's I take it so personally, and so I'm so thankful when people say thank you, but at the same time, what kind of world are we living in where I have to be thanked for doing the absolute bare minimum, you know?
It's incredible because I at some point did want to get into sort of the nuts and bolts of this thing because for me, it's like it's the gaslighting for me, right? Age of
Right,
myself
right.
generation. It's the
Yeah,
projection for me because how are you going to attempt a genocide and then blame the ones that you were attempting to genocide for genocide and then the world buys that, right? You have
correct.
literal apartheid level of
Mhm,
segregation taking place on your plot of land, but yet you are
yep,
so okay, you're riled up, you're ticked off, you're on the internet with it, which is exactly where you needed to be, where
mhm,
exactly where God has called you to be. What do you, okay, there's one part which we kind of discussed, which is, why are people gravitating to these ideas to begin with? But can you tell me the psychological aspect of projection, I guess. I don't know if it's the narcissistic tendency. I don't know what it is to say, okay, the Hamas supporters, one of their greatest tools and tactics is, I guess, the narratives, which are easy to digest. Genocide, apartheid state or occupation, and
Mhm.
starvation, right?
Yep.
So, with those three, and you can unpack as much as you want, because I want to get all the way into it, but do you think that was a strategic move from the very beginning to say we're going to do the Marxist sort? You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
that confounds, that blows my mind. I'm like, where is this, and how did this come to be?
And I think the most interesting part, which I think you're getting at as well here, is that when you look at people who talk about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict generally, the war in Gaza
Mm-hmm.
especially, is that all of the claims are inverted. So, for example, the real people that are trying to commit genocide are Hamas, who quite literally you can Google their charter because they're very loud and proud about this. They say that the
Yeah.
only way to accomplish Palestinian liberation is through jihad and killing all of the Jews in Israel from the river to the sea. They say that. Okay. Then what was the other one? Apartheid. There
Yeah.
are no Jews living in Gaza, and there are certain areas in the West Bank where if a Jewish person goes, they will be murdered. There's also a place in Gaza where it's, like, a black neighborhood essentially where they're, like,
Mhm.
segregated there as well,
They call it the
and they
slave quarters, actually.
Right,
See right
correct,
here,
correct.
11,000 Palestinians. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yeah.
then there's that, and then starvation, obviously, look at what they're doing to the hostages in Gaza, the Israeli hostages in Gaza. They are You can see the footage that they are publishing themselves, that they are starving
Yeah.
these people, and the unfortunate reality is I say that, and then people say, "Oh, you hate Palestinians." And it's like, "Well, no. I just think that Hamas needs to be removed from power because
Yeah.
you can watch videos of them quite literally stealing humanitarian aid from the Palestinian people. That's
Mm.
wrong, no matter what way you slice it. And the people
Yeah.
who claim to be so pro-Palestinian life are ignoring all of the voices coming out of Gaza of Palestinians saying, "We're being used as pawns by Hamas." So
Mm.
it's really interesting that when you look at all of these claims, they are weirdly inverted, and I think that's what makes it so difficult to have conversations with people about the, like, tactical issues here is because so much of it is, like, there's, like, a layer of scaffolding around everything that you have to unpack first, and so much of it is emotional
Yeah.
because of so much of the propaganda being about, "Oh, they're killing babies, they're killing," like, just all of the horrible graphic images that we see on the internet now.
So, as somebody who is studying the Holocaust, I'm so curious about, is it Himmler or
Mhm.
is it Goebbels who is responsible for the propaganda? Which one of those two was
Goals.
it? Those
Yeah,
Goebbels.
yeah.
So, propaganda.
Mhm.
How does it work? Because, like you said, it wasn't every German that was a Nazi. Yet, when you look at footage or whatever it is, it's like, there was a grandma that raised that Nazi youth. And I
Mm,
look at it the same with Hamas, right? Okay, who
mm,
raised them?
mhm.
It's not
So
just this little, separate group from this culture.
yeah. I think the interesting thing there's actually a term for this sort of inverted propaganda, it's called mirror propaganda, and it was actually used
Hmm.
by the Nazis, which is essentially just
Mirror propaganda?
mirror propaganda, yep.
Okay, I'm gonna write
You
that
can just
down.
essentially blame the Jews for all of the things that you are attempting to do, and this has been used throughout multiple genocides, including the Rwandan genocide as well, and I'm sure several
Mm,
others. But it is a common tactic, and as far as, like, being raised in a society, like, how does a person raise a Nazi? What I'd say is that the Jewish people and, scholars largely agree on this. The Jewish people are often called the canary in the coal mine for the dismantling of any advanced Western civilization. So when a
mm,
society gets advanced and they start having problems, they look for a person or a people group to blame. And
mm,
oftentimes that is the Jewish people because they are
yeah,
considered the canary in the coal mine. And there's a bunch of different reasons for that. In my opinion, a lot of it has to do with just them being spiritual reasons, and
yeah,
also because the Jewish people historically have refused to convert. They live very insular lives, and so
Mm,
they are considered foreigners, oftentimes visually are perceived to be foreigners by their religious dress, and what you cannot understand, you typically end up hating. And so
yeah.
for a lot of people, it just became really easy to blame all of the problems of Europe, especially post World War I and all of the financial issues, onto the Jewish people. And that, I
Mm,
think, is how you get because then it becomes personal, right? It's not just
yeah.
like, "Oh, Israel as an entity," or necessarily even the Jewish people as an entity. It's, "They have caused my problems personally." And that
Mm,
I mean, you look at even young men saying that, the pornography industry is run by Jews. That kind of thinking, it's like you are projecting a problem that you have personally onto another group of people. And so that,
uh,
I think, is how you create somebody who is, of course, obviously then at that point being like, "These people are responsible for my personal problems. Of course, I'm going to justify being able to kill them in my own head."
oh, you just I think you just sent 1 million groypers out of their grandma's basements with that statement right there. That
Yeah.
statement by itself, Liv.
Yeah.
So, it's interesting, and I don't want to get too much into the details of this, but you brought up something that's so specific that is something that every time I hear it, this is the thought that goes through my head. Well, it's a Jew who runs, Cornhub or whatever it is,
Mhm.
but who is it that's watching it?
Right.
Like, even if that
Correct.
was a thing, and we can unpack that entire thing of even, the liberal Jew who is the most anti-Zionist you will ever find, and you know what I mean? Like whether there's elements of self-hatred or self, preservation, like you even had back in 1920s, 1930s Germany. So there's that whole thing, right? Of what is a Jew?
Yep.
Is
Yep.
it somebody self-defining, etc.? But
Right.
then, like you said, personal agency, and that. So I do want you to get into this one because I feel alone is in some cases when it comes to this thought process. I don't see this expounded on. If you are blaming the Jews for your issues, if you are claiming that they control everything, what does that say about you?
Right. Right. It it always blows my mind, and I think the interesting part about people who are so quick to blame Jews in general for their problems. The reason why anti-Semitism is a unique form of hatred and why it functions differently than racism is that the Jewish people are seen as simultaneously the scum of the earth. I mean, if you look at Nazi propaganda, portrayed as parasites, portrayed as
Mm,
worms, but they are also the most powerful people. They are beneath you, but they are also above you. They control the pornography industry, but they also run all of the banks. So when you like, really, anti-Semitism shapeshifts and morphs over time. It's like a virus that just evolving
mm,
over time. And so the people that are so quick to blame the Jewish people for any of their personal problems, it becomes really easy when you can just reshape things a little bit and then blame
mm,
them for whatever the current predicament of society is right now. And you look at the things especially that, for example, in the United States that a lot of my generation is trying to come to terms with, for example, colonization and what we
yeah.
did to Native Americans. Like, that's a huge issue. We genocided the Native Americans. You look at all the language we use to describe the problems that our generation are coming to terms with in the United States, it's the same language they will use to describe Israel.
Hmm. Wow. The shape shifting hatred. That's gonna be
Yeah,
my little slogan for that. That's so good. It's basically the one size fits all.
yeah. Yeah,
If you have
it's
a
really
problem, I mean, I seen a man blame his divorce on the Jews, and I said, unless she was a Jew, then
right.
yeah, I'm not exactly sure which one that is, sir.
It's
I-
also just a lack of agency, I think. Like,
I-
you have to have I think a lot of it just stems from having such an insecure generation where we feel like
Yeah,
we have a lack of like, our locus of control is not internal, it's external, and so
yeah.
there's this desire to just say, "Well, I bear no responsibility for any of this," because so much of our generation just wants to, like, shove responsibility off onto other people. It's just really it's
Mhm.
anti-Semitism is basically just a much easier way to do that.
Mm. So, okay, we have 5 or so minutes left on the clock. I want you to express to us the things that you feel we need to know, because you are an educator, you are, informed to the wahoo. God made you for this and a time like this.
Thank you.
What is it that individuals, whether it's myself or anybody out there, what do we need to be reading, listening to? What do we need to know?
It's a great question. Well, I'd say first and foremost, read your Bible. Um,
Thank you.
that's that's definitely the most important.
Amen.
Pray, read your Bible, and join a community. If you're not part of a church, get involved in a church in a local body.
Quick
And if
question
you,
about the community. What are
yeah,
what are you looking for in the community? Because you said Dallas is your domain, right?
mhm,
I got a
yeah,
lot of family in Dallas, by the way. So I got
really, that's
yeah,
amazing.
Cedar
Yeah,
Hill, Fort Worth, yeah,
I live in, like, the Fort Worth area, like, I'm
yeah.
technically, like, in between the DFW area because everybody's like,
Mm,
"Which one?" It's technically I live in the Fort Worth side, but then people are like, "Where's Fort Worth?" I'm like, "Well, not near Austin." So, I live in, like, the Fort Worth area, and it's
mhm.
really like, I mean, I come from a little bit of a privileged perspective here because it's so easy to find a church in the South, like, it's they're on
Mm,
every corner, and there's a
yeah.
lot of places in the United States where it's a lot more difficult to find a church. The biggest thing is if your pastor can go through a sermon without quoting scripture, that's not a church you wanna be at. Like, you
That's
gotta make sure
good.
that your pastor is not only in his word and actually making sure that he's reading directly from scripture himself, but also has that the church has some type of accountability structure, whether that be an elder
Mm,
board, something like that. Um, that's what I'd say about finding a community, and for young
yeah.
people, I would say especially, like, finding a community of young believers as well who are in a similar stage of life as you is also
Mhm.
really important. Sometimes that can be difficult. Um, and then what else I'd say is a few things. There's definitely many books that you can read that would be and podcasts that are super helpful to become more knowledgeable about Israel, about the region.
Mhm.
I actually have in my bio on Instagram, I have a link for like I made a spreadsheet of all of the resources that I used when I was first educating myself about the Middle East, about the
Wow.
Israeli-Palestinian conflict. It has a whole thing of books, of podcasts, of YouTube videos. So that's hopefully a really helpful resource for people. And lastly, honestly, come to Israel. Like it's
Mm,
true. I'm here now, I'm a Christian, I feel so safe and so loved, and being here, I think it's really impossible to be here and then leave and still believe the lies that are being said
yeah.
about Israel media, especially when you're talking to Israelis about what it's like to live here and what they want for the country. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, come to Israel.
That's so good. And there's folks out there who push this propaganda of, well, the reason why they're being invited to Israel is so they can no, the reason why they're inviting them is because they have a narrative that has been drilled in their head that the only way it will shift is when they actually see it for themselves.
Yep,
Like
absolutely. I
that's
think
that sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, I think that has actually been the I've seen so many people come here and be like, "Wow, this is nothing like I was told it was." It's like, yeah, if you
Mm,
really wanna know for yourself, then come here, and I would say that, by the way, to anybody, not just Christians, not just non-Christians, I would say that to anybody of any faith. Coming to
yeah.
Israel is something that anybody and everybody should do.
Come speak to the Palestinians living in Israel. That would be
Yeah.
an interesting, right?
No,
These
yeah,
so-called oppressed doctors and lawyers out there.
yeah.
So again, this has been fantastic. And last thing, kind of beginning from what we had off camera, is you obviously have not just a vested interest, but really a vested interest. The reason why you're in Israel right now. What is something that your man has sort of exposed you to being a part of the IDF that
Mm,
has opened your eyes? Because I always feel like experiential
wow.
is the most powerful and emotional
Yeah.
is so.
I think something that I really appreciate about our relationship is that I don't have to explain anything. Like, when I first got into all this, it was really, like, spiritually so difficult for me and such an uphill battle,
Mm,
and the joke being that, like, the Jewish people have been dealing with this for 3,000 years. I just got here. Like, I'm new to this. I'm, like, freaked out. I don't know what's going on. I'm angry all the
yeah.
time, and the way that people in Israel, him especially, handle the the hatred is
Mm,
just, like, such a graceful way of handling hatred, that I hope to emulate one day, and
mm,
especially, you know, being in a combat unit and being on really, like, the front lines of a war, seeing that he doesn't hate anybody, and
yeah.
you will get this if you talk to, I mean, obviously, there's fringe groups in any society, but you talk to any combat soldier in Israel, and all they want is to protect human life. That's all they want,
Yeah.
and it would be so easy after October 7th, after watching that body cam footage that Hamas took themselves, to live in a state of just complete bitterness,
Mm,
and instead, the willingness to not just go out and defend your country, but also defend people that may not will not want the best for you, because
yeah.
defending human life is the right thing to do. That I think has really always just blown me away.
That is so good. That is so good. Even the person who is actively trying to blow your head off,
Yeah,
there's still a recognition, and I think there's no truer expression of who Christ is, right? And
amen.
at the end of the day, it's like, to lead all men, women, children, all people to Christ and to be a light that then draws men unto him. But I'm just thinking about that personally, like, okay, how would you feel if every single one of these people that want you dead, your job is to go and take care of them?
Yep. Yeah,
That's a
and that's what the
that's a
IDF
test
does,
right
and
there.
it just
Wow.
it just blows my mind, and especially because I think it's just such a cultural foreign concept to us because we wanna
Yeah.
hate everybody,
Yeah.
that to be here and be like, "Oh, wow, you're not you're still willing to put your life on the line to defend people that may want to cause you physical harm, and that you will," that it blows my mind.
Yeah. So shout out to that man right there. You
Yeah.
got our love and support and our prayers, and so do you live. I want to thank you once again for coming to the show. We will
Thank you.
have you back. Like that's not even
Thank
a
you.
yeah. That's not even a question. But to everybody out there, thank you guys for tuning in. Till the next time, peace. Appreciate you guys for tuning in. Now, if you'd like to stay around, make sure to click that little subscribe button down there, or you can show some love by going to the description below and clicking on the button titled Buy Me a Coffee. Leave a little something there, or click on the Cash App. Leave a little something here. Till the next time, peace. I've been up for hours, I've been up for days, yeah. Staring at the ceiling, I've been counting strays, yeah. I've been in my feelings, I've been out of mind. I've been getting visions of the other kind. Yeah, I've been up for weeks. I'm in the counting blessings over counting sheep. I can never be the type to limit when it comes to me. I used to be the pleaser for the people I ain't even need.